Well, how do you hear it? And that is muted. Zoom has no.
Okay, so we didn't hear anything, that all of that was muted. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Councilmember Annette Adimasu. I'm newly elected as of January this year. I really looked forward to attending tonight in person, but I'm still under the weather. I'll take about 10 minutes right now and share a little bit about myself. Some of my background: I grew up one of 5 kids in Decatur, Illinois. The later years I spent in the northwest of Chicago in Arlington Heights, where most of my family still resides. I had an aunt out here in Puyallup, Washington that we visited. She had a raspberry farm out here, and my grandfather lived in Grants Pass, Oregon. So I remember all those family visits in the station wagon, driving out here to the Pacific Northwest. And I always said, when I grow up, I'm going to move out here. I graduated from the university with a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Biology. I worked as a laboratory analyst in Houston, Texas. I worked internationally in the Peace Corps in the Dominican Republic as a biologist in a mountainous national park there. I'm fortunate to have learned Spanish while I was there. I realized my dream and moved out to Seattle after that. I worked here for the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and then switched over to the State Department of Ecology. While here, I got married. We had twins, boy, girl. Unfortunately, my husband passed away when our twins were just 2 years old. I worked hard. I struggled as a limited income single parent. I lived in a 1-bedroom duplex with the kids for 4 years. And then I bought a home here in Shoreline in 1998 and have lived here for 26 years. I'm going to retire here. I do not plan on leaving. This is my forever home. Why did I run for Shoreline City Council? I worked as a poll worker in Queen Anne in 1984. It was one of the first jobs I had when I moved here. Then years later, when Obama announced he was running, I became a volunteer for his campaign here in Seattle, and I joined the 32nd Legislative District. I later became an acting precinct committee officer in my neighborhood. If your current precinct has a PCO, precinct committee officer, you can also, if you want to become a precinct committee officer, you can find a vacant precinct in your neighborhood and become an acting PCO for that area. As an acting PCO and being part of the legislative district for 15 years, I've just learned so much about being involved in government. I've been a public servant most of my life. I've worked internationally, federal, state, and decided to act on the words, think globally, act locally. So I decided, with support from others, to run for city council. I'm grateful and humbled to work for the community here as a council member. It's a lot of work. I put in a lot of hours. I've met so many wonderful people. I thoroughly enjoyed knocking on doors and speaking with residents here, listening to all of you and what was important to you. I've met many people in this position, a lot of networking opportunities. It's very inspiring. People working to solve serious problems and make our communities better. So many honorable, dedicated, and positive looking people. It's very different than what you would think turning on the news. Government is just made up of individuals who work for the people. And I am telling you, everyone I have met is thoroughly dedicated and so inspiring, so much expertise all across in our region here. The issues that are close to my heart is our environment, affordable housing, health issues, both physical and mental. I find all of these 3 issues are interconnected. I dedicate my work to utilize both the knowledge and expertise I have, and I continue to learn as much as possible, listening to as many viewpoints as I can, doing research and making decisions on council that take all that into account for all our current generations and our future generations to come. I'm not sure if there is time to take a couple of questions or if we just go into, speaking of our next generations, we have Dr. Susana Reyes, School District Superintendent. So I'll turn it over to the moderator, how this will continue.
You can take some questions. You have plenty
Okay.
of time here. Dr. Reyes actually is needed to clone tonight. So she is at a school event and then we'll be doing this starting at 7:20. So you have plenty of time, and anybody who wants to ask questions, if you are online, please put your questions in chat. And those of you who are here, will ask you to go up to the mic to ask your questions so everyone can hear.
Okay, well, we're waiting for people maybe to come up. I'll talk about some of my volunteer activities I've done in my life. I worked on the Navajo Reservation in 1986. I worked in El Salvador during the war. I helped with translating there. I worked with Mothers of the Disappeared there. I'm kind of a world traveler, kind of a backpacker world traveler. During COVID, I was one of the founders of USOR, and that's United Shoreline Organized Against Racism, and that's where I met Suni here. So I worked with the Leonard Peltier International Office Defense Committee. He's a Native American man, innocent man who's in prison here in the United States. It was a real eye-opener working on that defense committee. So those are some of my volunteer background, but yeah, any questions?
Not seeing any. Again, those online, if you've got a question, please put it into the chat and we will convey it to the council member. Anyone here? Any questions? Okay. This is a quiet group tonight.
Okay.
A little group.
Is Susana here yet? Not yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, so my kids in grade school, they went to St. Matthew's School just down the road in Seattle, but then for high school, we lived just a block away from Shorecrest High School. So they went to the old Shorecrest High School, and it was they loved it there. They met so many wonderful people there. We've got a lot of great teachers. It's a very diverse student population. Yeah, it's I loved having my kids at Shorecrest High School. I only wish they were at the new school. It looks so beautiful. I know a lot of work went into building both redoing Shorecrest and Shorewood High Schools. So our children have a really positive, good environment to learn in. Any experiences you guys have with your students in the school district here?
Hi, Patty Hale. I live in the Ridgecrest neighborhood, so on the east side of Shoreline. I have a question just regarding your opinion. You can answer as briefly or as expansive as you would like, but I have heard that the city of Shoreline now wants to become a Tier 1 city. Could you describe what that is, your understanding, and how you feel about that? Thank you.
Okay, yeah. I can only speak for myself and not everyone on council. Normally the way you become a Tier 1 city is if you're a population of 75,000 or over. That's not a hard line exactly. The city of Shoreline is 60,000 people right now, so that would be considered a tier 2 city. So my opinion, with the little bit that I've researched on it, I prefer at this time to stay a tier 2 city. I think with the Growth Management Act, our current council and councils before have done a phenomenal job in keeping us looking forward and putting in place future units for places to live for people, affordable housing. We are well on our way as an existing tier 2 city, and we are in full compliance, it appears, with the Growth Management Act for future residents to come here. I'm not sure if Susana will touch on this tonight, but I've been looking at the data with the schools. We've been talking about schools that could be closing due to low enrollment. So when I looked at the death rates and birth rates and the trajectory, it is decreasing. But where you're going to get an increase is people migrating here to our shoreline area. So there's experts that are dealing with all those population issues. So right now, I think the forecast is in about 12 years, possibly, we will become a tier 1 city. Are there more questions in the chat here? Patty, did that give your answer? So yeah, right now I'm leaning towards staying a tier 2 city.
Hi, I'm Mike Chan and I live in the Briarcrest area. Just thinking about the things we just talked about. Are you familiar with the multi-family property tax exemption that the city gives out to developers to build affordable housing within Shoreline?
Yes, the multi-family exemption,
Yeah.
yes.
From what my understanding is, we've got like 13,000 units coming online, and a lot of those units are 1-bedroom units. So really, you're not having new families moving into Shoreline, and that's going to affect our school population. So how do we deal with that? And at the same time, losing all that property tax that should be going to the school.
Exactly. So it is just a partial tax exemption. I believe it's on the building portion for a set number of years. It depends on how many units they have for a specific AMI. So yes, looking at the last 10 years, King County had 16% population growth. They're looking at that for the future 10 years, 16% population growth. The council has seen some of the development go in that it is studios and 1-bedrooms. There's very little 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. So the council has, at many of the meetings since January that I've been at, we've asked that more be done to encourage 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units. We will be looking at middle housing this year. So my focus will be making sure that there's incentives somehow to build middle housing, first-time home buyers for small families, 2 and 3 bedrooms. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that.
That's good to hear, because from my understanding of that property tax exemption, so these developers would just pay the land tax, not the improvements. So most of the added value is the structure. These structures are millions of dollars because they're big. That's a lot of money that's not going in. So it'd be interesting if the city could collect some metrics on how much money the schools are losing, with not collecting the property tax there, and see how effective it is. I know we want to build housing for growth, but if we just focus on just a population where they're just going to be here working and transiting back down to Seattle or wherever, when they start a family, they all have to move out. And so we're losing on both ends there. And so I'm just glad to hear that you guys are thinking about that.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with you, Mike. Thank you for that input. And yeah, keep giving council input on that. That's very important. And I see some other people have put in the chat that they have their son and exchange students at Shorecrest. Some people from Echo Lake, Einstein, and Shorewood. And now at Western, my daughter went to Western Washington University. My son went to Seattle Pacific University. Someone has a senior at Shorewood. Yeah, we have a great school system here. I'll go back to some of that tier 1 and tier 2. Under tier 2, it's my understanding that when we look at middle housing, let's say, it would, I believe, cap it at changing the current R6 zone. You could change your property up to 4 units under the tier 2 as a tier 2 city. As a tier 1 city, you could change an R6 zone to 6 units. So we're not at 75,000 people yet. I don't believe we need to go that dense. So I would like to stay with the maximum 4 units in an R6 zone. So it keeps more with the community and it does still meet our needs as far as with the Growth Management Act. So I do see Susana is here, so I'm very excited. I'm staying the hour to hear what she has to say. So I'll hand it back to the moderator. It's good to see everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Reyes. We're so glad to see you, and thank you for fitting this into your evening. I do not have a formal in a bio for you tonight. I know that some people have, so we would just love it if you could introduce yourself a little bit, talk about your time in Shoreline, and then you are welcome. You can easily share your screen.
For sure. Thank you. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for letting me, 1, join a little late, and 2, share my presentation via Zoom. We have a couple of events in the district today that I sort of ended up double booking myself, and I didn't want to not share information with you, but I'm Susana Reyes. I'm the superintendent for the Shoreline schools. I am completing my 3rd year in the district, and it has been really a wonderful 3 years, even with all the, difficulties around our fiscal situation. We have an incredible community comprised of our Lake Forest Park community and our Shoreline community, and have been able to connect and learn a lot about our families, our students, and various organizations in our community, like our neighborhood associations and our Rotary and our 2 Rotaries anyway, Lake Forest Park and Shoreline and the Chamber, and just a number of different ways that I've been able to get to know, the place that I live and work in. I'm originally from Mexico, born in Mexico City. Some of you might already know that. Came to Shoreline from the Pasco School District, where I was assistant superintendent for 4 years. And previous to that, I was in Spokane and in Pullman and in Wapato, where I was raised and went to school and graduated from high school there. And then attended WSU, where I earned my degrees, bachelor, master's, and doctorate. So that's, like, in a nutshell, a little bit about me. But I'm happy to just jump right in if that works. And I think I should have capability to share my screen. And I think I'm going to do this. And I'm going to do slideshow. And hopefully you see the slideshow. I think so. Yeah. And I'm going to want to be able to read everything. So, okay. So what I'm going to do today is just share briefly the status of our fiscal picture, both current and then what we're looking at into the next couple of years. And so I'll just jump right in. I'm going to start with our land acknowledgement. The Shoreline School District acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land and the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Puyallup, Suquamish, Tulalip, Snoqualmie, and Muckleshoot nations. We have this acknowledgement on our website, and we also offer the links that you see here for community, students, families to be able to access additional information. We have been utilizing our race and equity impact decision-making tool for a few years now, actually. We have a policy, race and equity policy 0150 that was adopted in 2017. And then this tool was developed to help us as we work in any number of ways in our district where we're considering and thinking about decisions and therefore what impacts might be felt by different groups of people in our community. And so this has really helped us guide our process, even in hard, difficult times like our budget situation, because we know that even though we don't have everything we know we need, our fiscal picture doesn't really provide that capacity for us. We know that we've been really thoughtful and we're thinking about how we might mitigate impacts, and at the very least, acknowledge and work through an equitable process to make those really difficult decisions. So just want to make sure you are aware of that. I'll share a little bit about enrollment and a financial update, current one, as of April anyway, our budget outlook, and then what 2025 or 25-26 might look like. But first, I want to share some pictures of our kiddos. We've had opportunities this year to have our children enjoy a number of different types of foods. And we had a child who requested injera bread from Ethiopia. And one of our director of food services, who's in the picture, made sure to make that happen. And so our children were able to enjoy that. We had our Einstein Middle School ceramics class take drawings from Echo Lake first and second graders of their monsters, and they created their monsters for them in the ceramics class. So that's a photo here of a couple of students with the drawing that the young student gave them, and then they made those monsters that you see there. So a lot of fun, really wonderful ways that our students are connecting, that our teachers are facilitating, and making sure that we build that community across grade levels. We also this year adopted the proclamation recognizing May 5th as Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Awareness Day. The photo on the left here is includes Cameron Hubbard, who is a 9th grade student at Shorewood High School. Cameron presented to the school board and encouraged us to consider adopting this proclamation. She helped us understand the importance of bringing awareness to this really travesty that a lot of our Indigenous people really across the nation, but also obviously in our state face. So that was really important, and we appreciated Cameron's leadership. This year's robotics team Pronto went to World Championships. I happened to be there for in Houston, and I happened to be there for a conference, and so I got to go join them for a couple of their matches there. So that was fun. Some of you may have heard of the zebra sightings, and so we had some fun with a photo of one of our staff members wearing black and white, and our public information officer photoshopped a zebra in there, and we posted this on Facebook, and it was fun to see everyone's reaction. And then yesterday was the last board meeting for our two graduating senior school board representatives, Lily Fredericks and Esme Harkes. And so we celebrated them last night. We have two juniors who are moving into being seniors next year, and we'll be selecting the new rising juniors to join us next fall. So we congratulate Lily and Esme on their accomplishments and wish them the best. Lily's from Shorecrest and Esme's from Shorewood. So those are fun things. We want to make sure that you know that we are continuing to be an amazing school district and supporting our young people in a lot of different ways. Enrollment. So let's jump right into that. The blue line on this graph is the actual enrollment. You can see on the bottom the bottom axis there, going across, x-axis is all the months of the year. The black line, the solid black line, is the average enrollment that we reported to the state that we would be seeing this year. The blue line is the actual. So you can see we sort of started above the black line, but then we started to trend downward. And it's actually typical because the other lines that you see, the purple, the green, and the orange, and even the red up above, also trended that way. Even it just happens that way sometimes in the springtime. The red line is where we used to be back in 2019-20. So this really provides a picture of that gap that we're having to work through when it comes to funding impacts, right? Because enrollment really drives most of our funding. So what we're projecting as of May, what we're projecting to be toward the end of the year, you can see that the blue line continues to kind of stabilize, but it's still below where we started earlier in the year. So we'll probably be, we think we'll at least meet the average that we said we would. So we'll see, because the reason the black line is sort of trending downward is because overall, in the end, we might have an overall average that might be maybe a little less than what we had projected. Some of the factors that we think about when it comes to enrollment are those that are listed here on the left-hand side. Kinder enrollment's been declining, as a lot of you may have heard. We do have some stabilizing in our home education exchange program. Our Running Start program is still pretty strong, which means when students leave to access college outside of high school, we do send that funding to the colleges, most of it, 93% of it. We also are seeing more students who qualify for special education services and students joining the district who have special needs. We're seeing more students who speak different languages other than English, so really diversifying our district even more so. We continue to be open for out-of-boundary students or out-of-district students at the elementary, middle, and high. And, you know, when we see the downward trend, we look at where kids are going, where families are going. And some of them are going to districts in the surrounding area, for example, Linwood, or Edmonds, but going to like a school in Linwood. Others are moving further out of the area, sometimes out of the state. And so, you know, sometimes it's people move for jobs, or maybe it's more affordable to live in areas outside of our district. And then the table here just gives you some of the numbers that we compare throughout the year, like what we budgeted, where we are as an average over in May, and then just the difference there. And I can make this presentation available. It's already on our website because we presented this yesterday to the school board. So financial update. I'm going to cover 23-24, but what you see here is a table that I shared last year that really demonstrated for me, especially, you know, being relatively new in the district, even last year, as in my second year, we saw that we had a pattern of spending quite a bit more over the years than we were taking in. But one of the reasons I know that we would do that is because we did have a really healthy reserve or savings account, like above the policy required level. And so it's very normal to invest back into the system. But then when COVID hit, inflation went up, enrollment declined, there were a lot of factors that came together that ended up having us be in a place where we were starting to dip in way too much into those savings. And so last year in 22-23, we made some really significant reductions that led to a more balanced sort of expenditure versus revenue budget that we submitted in August. And it was not without pain. That I have to emphasize. It's been really hard. So I just am really grateful to our community, our staff, our students, our labor partners who've contributed to that effort. This is a graphic that gives you a picture of where we've been. The far left-hand side are obviously the dollars in millions. But in 2014-15, the green line is the unreserved discretionary savings account, dollars that we can totally spend in just general operating costs. So you can see that we were pretty healthy. The policy requirement is for us to be somewhere between $6 and $7 million of savings. And you can see that we were pretty up there. So when you're that high, you definitely want to be making sure that you're using it to support the system and utilizing those funds. And we were doing that. But then when COVID hit in 2020, you can see the downward trend there right away. And then it continued because of COVID and all the impacts related there, we weren't making the kind of reductions that on a typical normal year you might. We just couldn't because there was just a lot of impacts that COVID was presenting. And as you know, the guidance from the state was make sure that people are safe and that people have their jobs and all of that. And so we had to just kind of wait that out. And we did receive federal funding to support us, but it wasn't as much as other districts that are larger or who have a higher poverty level. And so you can see that ultimately the green line ended up and continues to be below the policy level, which is the bottom sort of portion of that policy level is the red line. We want to be between the blue and the red line to be at policy level in unrestricted savings, general fund dollars. The board did provide a waiver to allow us to do that. This is a picture of all the work that happened last year. Community meetings, staff meetings, meetings with students, surveys, a number of different things, budget advisory team. So I share this because it's been a journey and we want to make sure that we continually share the background so that people who may not have been with us last year can understand sort of where we've been and be able to ask, questions that we right at the ready have information to share back. This is information of all the various ways that we ended up reducing last year. You can see we reduced a lot of positions, both in non-classroom positions, but also central office and administrative positions. Our staff took furlough days. Our labor partners gave up a lot of provisions in their contracts to help us save money so that we could also not have to cut even more positions than we did. So huge lift on the part of our labor partners. All of them, obviously our Teachers Association is the largest group, and of course their contribution was the most significant. Our Support Professional Association was also significantly impacted in terms of what they gave, not only in positions that we reduced, but also from their own contract as well. So just a lot of work in that regard. We did end the year last year a little bit higher. We had thought we'd end around 2 million. We ended up at around 4 million, but that's still at 2.6% and not that 4. So while it was better, it's not that $6 or $7 million that we really should have. And then on the right-hand side are some details as to why those numbers came up a little higher. And I can circle back to this. So what do our revenues look like this year? The red line is our budgeted revenue. The red line is what we told the state we expected to see coming in, both from enrollment, funding, but also from our levy, our property tax collections that our voters have approved back in 2022. And so the green line is the actual revenue received. So we're kind of charting it out to see where our projections are taking us and are we matching up. You'll see a little bit of a bump in December, January, and we did have a few more students enroll earlier in the year, so then we received monies for that. And that's why you see that green line a little bit above the red line in those months, which is helpful because when you receive more students, you also spend more because you want to support the additional student numbers. And so the state sends a little bit more to help us with that. This gives you kind of a picture of, I have to move this out of the way so I can see. I have a menu bar here that's okay. This is the revenue summary change total, how have things changed from how we budgeted, which is the third column, the 23-24 budget, where we think we were going to be ending at as of February. The shaded kind of teal gray sort of color is the projection of where we think we will end in August as of April. So we're always a little bit behind in terms of our reports because, we have to wait till to close out the books for each month. And so there's always a little bit of a delay, but we're still tracking it. In the end, we're going to spend a little more than, we're going to take in a little bit more money than what we expected in August. So instead of 168 million, we'll see 172 million, which is good because we are actually spending it as a result of also the additional students, and I'll share more about that here shortly. So some of the points that I can share related to all of that, I think the enrollment, additional students who have special needs or need multilingual services. We do have more students riding buses. That also helps. We will be receiving safety net funding, which is a special education grant that we apply for to get some of the money that we spend back. So we'll be reimbursed. We hope it'll be significant. Our team did a great job, and it's a really complex process to apply for it. So we're excited, to hopefully see some of those dollars come back. And then there was some post-legislative funding. We have free breakfast and lunch program at Ridgecrest, so that helps also with those costs. Because it ends up being like revenue that we end up being able to keep as opposed to spending, right? Expenditures for this year, again, we have this red line in this case, that is what we budgeted we would spend, and the black line shows what we're actually spending. And so we're tracking it pretty closely. You can see the bump up of expenditures in December or so, and that is where we were using more dollars to contract with agencies to support the needs of some of our students. And then more students going to Running Start, so we send more money out of our system for that. So ultimately, the changes are pretty equal to the revenue. So we're seeing a bit more revenue, and we're also spending a bit more. So luckily, that is balancing out. 87% of our expenditures are on salaries and benefits for all of our staff. So this is just kind of a visual of that. And I shared this verbally. I don't think we are seeing more staff utilizing substitutes. So that's coming in a bit more expensive because we pay for a lot of the substitute costs because the state only covers 4 days per person, but the state gives 12 days, but we have to pay for the rest. And so when people utilize leave, we end up, needing to make sure that we can cover those costs. People have a right to use their sick leave. And so we want to make sure that people know that it's okay. We just, as a district, we need to make sure that we can cover those. So 2023, just a summary of 23-24, where we think we will be. The green line in this case is the 4% fund balance target that we should be at. The blue and the red are the budgeted is the red, the projected is the blue. So we think we're going to end up a little higher than what we budgeted at the end, but you can see that we'll still be below the green line. So good news, that will be above the zero, like we're not going to go in the negative, but it's still kind of sobering because we're not going to be in a healthy space either, but we're hanging in there. These are just the totals, kind of a table depiction of the graph that I just shared. We'll be probably at about 2.6% ending fund balance for unrestricted funds, which is about 4.4 million. And that's the 1, 2, 3, the fifth column, the shaded column there. So what are we looking at for next year? We have to project fewer enrollment, so we need to plan for less revenue in enrollment. And we just have to be conservative, because if we budget higher and then we don't see the students, we still have to cover the costs that we would have staffed for the year. And so we just have to be thoughtful about that. And about 100 students renders about $1 million. We'll see some changes in revenue. So we'll collect a bit more in levy, due to, probably increase in property tax or property assessment. We'll see some dollars for enrollment, which is the apportionment figure that you see here for 4.9 million. So it'll cover some of the cost of living increases and some of the, just general material supplies and operating costs. So that's good. But as you know, the state doesn't fully cover it, right? So we'll have to come up with the rest of that. And then we'll see a bit more in special education sort of revenue, because we'll have, we've seen more students. Again, a little bit more in some of these other programs, also because of enrollment, but some of those are really restricted, as you know. So this is kind of the changes that we're thinking about for next year. We also need to think about expenditures that we have to cover next year. And some of those include some of the cost of living increase needs that you see on the second row, some salary deferrals that we said we would pay for next year. We're going to continue to provide extended learning opportunities. We have to make sure we have those dollars. We need to be able to cover substitute cost increases and all of that. So these are like big picture numbers that we're thinking about expenditure wise for next year. Ultimately, based on where we think we'll be in revenue next year, what we think we're going to spend in the end of next year. So in August of 2025, we anticipate still being at around that 2.5% fund balance. Again, it's above zero, but it's below the 4%. So, but you know, I just want us to just kind of hang in there as we get through these. And in January, December, we're going to be talking with our legislators and really pressing them to do right by our schools, because they aren't funding us the way they should be. When we're just trying to stay afloat. We don't want to go into binding conditions. That would not be a good thing for us. We need to try to do this as a community. So I really appreciate that people have been sort of joining us in this effort. And even if it's hard, you know, the grace and the patience and the kindness that people are like weathering this with is really something that I truly appreciate. For 25-26, so, you know, we're even thinking about that following year, right? Again, enrollment, we have to think about that, continue to think that it might be, you know, decreasing. So we might be projecting even fewer that year. Pauses in our contracts, like different employee groups paused some of their provisions, like stipends for different things. Those expire next year at the end of 24, 25. So we need to be thinking about how we're going to pay for all that following year, right? Substitute costs. Again, you know, our tech levy, we've been utilizing it in some different ways to help us. It's not best practice. And so, I mean, it's okay to do it, but it's not the best practice. And so we want to try to figure out how can we not utilize our tech levy for some of the pieces that we're currently utilizing it for, which really should come out of our general fund. And then we'll run a levy in 2026. That'll cost us about $250,000 that we have to cover. So we need to think about that cost. Anyway, some of the things in summary, just partnership with our employee groups, incredible steadfastness of all of our staff, our students, our community. You know, it's really helped us stay above that negative mark. And we've avoided having to go into binding conditions. We do anticipate, you know, like I shared, being at that 2.6% this year and next year, but it's not at the policy level. And it's important for us to get back there because we have to have sufficient cash flow. And we want to be able to respond to unexpected needs that come up. We'll need to press our legislators for additional revenues. We'll run a levy in 2026 and maximize it. So we'll ask our voters for a bit more money and really share in detail what that means for tax rates. And then, you know, we'll continue to consider reductions as potential opportunities arise. If we can do it, we will reduce. But if it's just too much and we can't, the system can't weather it, then we just, you know, we'll just try to stay afloat. Because we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can do to get through this in the best way possible. So there you go. That is my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, anything that, you know, caught your attention. I'm happy to just have you ask anything. I know I went through that really fast. I hope that was okay.
Hi, Dr. Reyes, Rebecca Chan. I have a
Hi.
question for you about the highly capable programming. In Seattle, they are removing their standalone program. And I'm wondering if there's been any kind of discussion, conversation here in Shoreline about how we're equitable with our highly capable program and maintaining it the way it is.
Thank you for the question, Rebecca. We have not had any conversations about that. As we're planning for next year, we are maintaining the model that we currently have. And I've not had any conversations with anyone about doing something different. I think for something like that, we would want to engage our community, just like we've been doing with all these other different efforts. So I do appreciate the question, and I'm not surprised that people wonder, right? Because Seattle's right next to us, and I know it's important for a lot of members in our community. Thank you. I see a hand, Val.
Yeah, hi. So I've got a daughter in first grade at Echo Lake, and my other daughter will be in kindergarten next year. So high on my priority list is the talk of closing a school. So I just have a lot of questions around that. Specifically, like if a school is closed, what are the cost savings projected to be? Will it put us above that 4%?
That is a wonderful question, Val. It is Val, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But okay. So on our website, there is a page where all of the materials that are being used by the committee to review and analyze that possibility are provided for our community to access. If that decision is made, it won't be made until officially, right now we're looking at even January. Right now, the committee's trying to figure out what schools to take off the list, and they're using a lot of data and information to come to those sort of decision points along the way. The committee is not making the decision. The school board will make the decision in the fall, or as late as January. The implementation of that won't take place until 25, 26. In terms of the savings, I haven't been a part of the meetings because I want to give the committee and our leadership the space to be able to have, do that work. But the estimated savings number is about $1.5 million. And you asked the question, will that help us get us back? Maybe not, but it'll help because after year, those $1.5 million sort of add up, right? So maybe not that first year. And as we see inflation continuing, if we see a continued decline of enrollment, we'll have less revenue, which because we're only at that 4 million or so potential unreserved fund balance, if we don't make any more, reductions, and even if we close a school, I don't know that we'll still get to that. But over time we will. I know that wasn't probably the best answer, but it's just because I'm working off of sort of, professional estimates in a way.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I've been following it all closely.
Okay.
It's just good to, I don't know, hear your input on it and
Yeah.
get all the details. So thank you.
Yeah, no, you're so welcome. Thank you for the question. And was there another question in the chat maybe?
There is. What is the consequence of being in a binding condition with the state?
Well, for one, we wouldn't be able to even have time or be given the option to establish committees like we have been doing to problem solve our way out of it as a community. It would be basically a directive from the state that we must cut a certain amount, and because especially in school districts, the majority of our costs are on staffing, they will say you need to cut this number of staff, and there's no option about it. And we have to develop a plan to show that we will do that within a 1 or 2 year sort of time frame. And they review it, and if they don't like it, they send it back and say, nope, you got to do better. This is not going to be sufficient. And then we just have to, those are steps we'll have to take. There won't be really a way for us to try to collaboratively try to figure it out. And I think that's probably the hardest part. And you probably have heard some of the turmoil and the really, difficult hardship that Marysville is going through right now, our one of our neighboring districts up north, and it's just really hard. And there are 5 districts right now in that situation. And so our goal, as a system is to just keep talking with our community and sharing where we are, being transparent, and just trying to get through it together in this way and weathering what feels really hard right now. Because that would be one of the consequences. We could also lose our risk pool insurance, which is the liability insurance that we have to carry. There's just a number of different factors that can come out of that. And so, yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing is that we wouldn't even be able to connect in this way and try to do it together. And I think it'd be really hard for us to, you know, to have it feel like it's a collaborative process, you know, when you're being told what you have to do. And so for us, it's important that we just engage our community and try to work through it. I hope that helped.
Okay, another question here. Wouldn't it make more sense to wait to consider a school closure until a year or two past the 25-26 school year? With more government funding being pushed for at the beginning of next year and new growth happening with light rail development, wouldn't it be better to wait to see how things pan out if we are in a roughly 2.5% holding pattern for funding currently?
That is an incredibly important question. And it's not a question that we, like, even myself, like, I think about it, right? You run a lot of risk because, number one, additional funding from the state isn't guaranteed, right? So we're going to press them like next January, you know, when they're in session, to really make some significant changes to their formulas and the way they fund schools. And at the very least, look at significant special ed funding, as well as adjusting the inflation factor of the formula for just general operating costs. That is a formula that does not have the current inflation factor incorporated. It's an inflation factor from like years and years and years ago. So we're going to ask them to really look at those two areas. If they do, we'll see that funding in 25-26, but it's not guaranteed, right? And so we still have to be looking at the, I mean, you know, we don't know that we'll close the school. That hasn't been decided, but we need to look at that because we just don't know what'll come out of the legislature, if anything, right? The other thing, last year when I was going around sharing the information about our situation, I had requests from community members, from parents, from school staff to establish a committee to look at this topic and see if closing the school was an option. So I'm also, as a superintendent, being responsive to feedback like that, to make sure that we're looking at everything. Because if we do that as a community, then we can at least say we did everything we could, right? And people are asking us to do that. And so that's another reason why we want to look at that. The question about, we're hoping we get more money, so we'll see. The new growth with the light rail is not rendering a lot of students. It's the growth is primarily construction that caters to people who don't have children because they're studio apartments, they're one-bedroom apartments primarily, and they cost a lot of money. You know, a one-bedroom, you know, studio is about $2,000. I was at the Geo for a couple years and my rent was about $2,700 for a one-bedroom. That's a lot of money, you know, for our families to be able to afford in this area. And if there isn't space for children to run and play, it's hard for a family to choose to live, you know, in our community. Also, the birth rate is lower, so we're also not seeing families with young children even moving into our community. And then, of course, the affordability is another issue. Yeah, you know, I understand, you know, kind of like holding that 2.5. That's kind of where I am right now, right? Just wanting to stay there, like, let's not go below that. Let's just hang in there. But we also have ongoing increasing costs, like inflation will continue. The state, you know, unless they fund everything, we're still always going to be sort of making sure that we are able to cover all of our expenditures. So I hear that question. I hope that the way in which I responded provides at least a sense of like, yeah, we've thought about it, and these are the things that we also grapple with. And they're good questions. So thank you for that.
Val is asking, and this is a great question, I think that probably a lot of us are wondering right now, Is there a current petition that we can sign and send to our reps, imagine in the state, to try to get more funding? I would love to send them something, but don't have any idea what to say other than please fund our public schools.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can't like do a call to action or anything like that, you know, because that's not appropriate. But what I can share with you is that our PTA has a lot of information on their website, and individuals can advocate in any way that they would like to. When the legislative session opens, there are a number of different bills that will be shared out publicly. Our school board, we have legislative representatives on our school board, Director Silvia Gil and Director Megan Jernigan. And so they will be teaming up on that effort. And our school board will be sharing information about the various bills that will also be bills related to advocacy around funding. So I would encourage you probably around the fall time to reach out again, and we can share that information so that you're in the loop as to what we're advocating for. And you'll have enough information there to be able to then decide in whatever way you wish to advocate, and also connect with your PTA, because the Shoreline PTA Council is doing some significant work as well. There's a group of people that are really engaged in that work. And if you send me an email, I can send you their contact info and everything as well. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Olivia and I live in Echo Lake, and I have two daughters. My older one's going to go into kindergarten in 2025. You know, we moved into Shoreline in 2017, and you hear about the great reputation of the school district. It's a reason to move here. So looking at some of the data you showed, how things started to get kind of shaky through COVID and after that. And it just makes me feel a little nervous as a parent who has yet to send kids through the school district, hearing things like huge budget shortfallings or cuts, and at the whim of the legislature, and possibly closing schools and maybe the school our kids will go into. So I just kind of wanted to hear from you, or like on behalf of you or on behalf of the school board, like what do you think are the pillars of what we offer at these schools that you would not negotiate on, or you would not want to see fall, you know, to continue to provide the quality of education in decades to come?
You know, thank you for the question. I think our values are really, our core values are around equity and supporting the needs of our students who have been not served in the way that we know our system could if we adjust it in different ways. I think that is a pillar. I think the other piece related to that question is around a sense of community, making sure that our families feel supported, that they have high quality academic experiences in every one of our schools, that we do everything we can to ensure that there's resources for students to learn and to access, that there's opportunities for children to enjoy learning outside of school, like our clubs and sports and activities. Those are all the pieces that I know are critically important to our community, especially having now been here 3 years. It's interesting, you asked the question about what is non-negotiable, and I think ultimately, if we were in a really significant, like we had to make those cuts that I mentioned, in a system like ours, which is a public school system set up with classrooms and where there's the teacher, the students, the principal, and making sure that a school has that core kind of component. To me, those are the pieces that we always have to make sure we have in place, no matter what, right? That academic piece related to the staffing component, and then anything else we can do to continue to enhance and support our work as it relates to race and equity has to continue. We've done a tremendous amount of work in that area. And so, and it's, again, it's tough, because I probably, many of you maybe have had, moments where you're like, what, how are we going to get through this? And I still think we get through it as a community, and we think about, okay, we can't do this year, but at least we have like this other piece. I mean, that's kind of where it goes. And then how do we make sure then that we're using our race and equity tool to mitigate the impacts that we might be seeing for groups of students that we say, you know, hey, we're all about this, but then we also see some of these impacts. But I think the core of our work is around equity and around ensuring that every student, that our schools are staffed in the way that is as optimal as possible with whatever funding we have. So I don't know if that helped, but I understand the concern. I believe in our community. I think that we are an incredible, both our Lake Forest Park and Shoreline, you know, communities come together in a way that is truly special. And that's kind of why I'm here. You know, I don't want to be anywhere else doing this work, right? And so I do believe in us. I believe we can get through this, and we're going to be thinking about different ways we can mitigate some of the impacts that we're seeing and be really thoughtful about critical decisions that may be coming down the road, like the school closure topic. That's why we're taking our time and being really thoughtful about that. I see a hand, Lisa.
Oh, there we go. I just wanted to comment as a parent of older kids, we actually went through the last school closure. So
I think I lost you.
and my youngest in 2014. So back in 2008, when the school board had to make that really hard decision, we had to close 2 elementary schools. We also, so we closed Sunset Elementary and North City, and my kids were going to Sunset at the time. So it was a really hard decision, very tumultuous within the school building. What's going to happen to our staff? What's going to happen to all of our families? And I remember my daughter, who was in 5th grade at the time, you know, they weren't going to be able to finish their school year. There are a lot of emotion. And she was like, but I don't know what the big deal is, Mom. We're all going to go to different 6th grades, and then we'll all meet up in Einstein later. And it was, the kids were very resilient. They did fine, I guess, to calm some of the parents' nerves. If it meant we saved all that staff finances from all of our certified and classified staff and everything else, it ended up working just fine. And I appreciated that the school board was, had the backbone to decide in advance that we had to do that. So that's what I wanted to say, is that we all survived. It worked out fine. But it is upsetting. It just meant we bused kids to other areas of my daughter, because we were at Sunset, she ended up going to Cyree. Some of her friends went to Highland Terrace, but they all met up in Einstein and they survived. It's okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
Sure.
It is hard, and yeah, I appreciate that comment. And hopefully it helps people at the very least just be okay that we're having the conversation, and then we'll see where it takes us. So thank you.
Yeah.
I did see in the chat a question from Richie. Will there be other schools other than Ridgecrest that will receive whole school free lunch in the 24-25? Yes. And I can't remember which ones they are, but possibly Echo Lake, possibly Parkwood. I just haven't kept up with the raw data on that, but we will see more schools receiving the free meal program. Yes, we should be. Will additional schools qualifying for free school lunch translate to savings for the school district? We believe so, because that has been the case with Ridgecrest. So once we know fully like which ones they are, we might be able to actually put a number on that. Thank you for the question. That's a great one.
Hi, Patty Hale.
Hi, Patty.
How are you?
I'm good,
Busy
thanks.
day for you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
So we talk about the possibility, or studying the possibility, of closing a school as one of the cost-saving measures. Well, I hate to bring it up. What about vacant property? And
Oh, yeah.
is it feasible to keep from closing a school by selling a property? None in Ridgecrest.
That's a great question. We could sell property, but those dollars cannot be used as part of our general savings, general fund account. They would go into capital projects, to the capital projects budget, which is primarily for buying more land or for building new schools or new construction. I'm glad the question came up though as well, because we will be establishing a committee to look at a long-term facilities plan, long-range plan to help us sort of know and have a roadmap for when we're going to rebuild one of our, older elementaries, for example, or what do we want to do with land? I mean, we do have people that have inquired about different properties. And so without a long-range plan, it's hard to provide responses to questions like that. And so we'll be developing that. We'll be establishing a committee. So be on the lookout for an invitation to participate in that group in the fall.
Any other questions? I don't think there are any more online, any more in chambers here. I think that we can call this a wrap and you can get
Sure.
back to your evening. Thank you so much, Dr. Reyes.
I so appreciated your time. I appreciate that you let me join late, and I'm going to see if our celebration is still happening so I can congratulate our award winners this year. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you. Good summer. Okay, before we wrap, this is the last CityLearn until September. We will be taking July and August off so everybody can be out and enjoying. I think this is a hint of hopefully what we can enjoy. We will be meeting again September 11th. So the second week of September, and the focus will be on human services. And it'll be a good one. And I think you'll get to learn more about MFDE as part of that. So thank you all for being here. And thank you to everybody who did this online. Have a great summer.